Martyrdom of Imam Hussein, recite the third one even louder. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Alhamdulillah, what I have noticed here is the prolonged recitations of the Quran before the program. This is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to have this in our communities. We need to recite the verses correctly and beautifully, and we need to pay attention to the meanings. I hope that members of this community who have the ability to recite the verses of the Quran so eloquently and beautifully are able to pass that on. We need more and more of such talents showing for the community to benefit in more than just one way, and simply hearing the beauties of the Quran. If we don't recite the verses, if we don't read the verses, if they're not read in a way where it's appealing and people are drawn to it, we will not be reminded to look at it. It will just be sitting there on the shelf and we will not be looking at it. The gate to us looking at the Quran and looking at the teachings, trying to understand and comprehend, reflect on the verses, is to have them recited, and I hope that continues and more people are able to do that, inshaAllah. So one of the things that we're going to try to do over the course of these nights that we are here is to explore some of the verses, chapters of the Quran, and see the connection of the movement of Imam al-Hussein, what he did with the Quran, with the verses of the Quran. We know, we have heard as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, as the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, we have heard that the Ahlul Bayt are the speaking Qur'ans. What they do, what they say is the Quran. Whatever they do can be reference to a verse or chapter of the Quran. One of the unfortunate things that has happened is because of us not being so connected with the Quran or the Ahlul Bayt, we have not done so. We have not looked carefully at what the Ahlul Bayt have done, what the Ahlul Bayt have said, and we have not looked carefully at the Quran, and therefore this is only something that we utter and we don't really truly understand. We can't even give a couple of instances of that for many of us, unfortunately. We have got to study, reflect, think about what the Ahlul Bayt did. The reason why Muharram is a time that we need to get together and remind and speak and mention things is not to stagnate and repeat certain material without reflecting upon it and just going and continuing that. That's not the objective of this. That's not what has kept Islam alive. That's not what has caused Islam to grow. Islam has grown because of Muharram and Safar, because of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, because of his sacrifice, because of his martyrdom, because of the martyrdom of his ashab. But in order for us to benefit from that, we've got to learn that in order to be able to reflect that. Even that is not the last step. Let's also be clear on that. To speak of and carefully understand what the Ahlul Bayt said, what they did, what the Quran says is not it. The objective is to then be able to, as individuals and collectively as communities, to be able to implement that. If we're thinking why Muslims are not the ones that, as the Quran says, وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَنَجْعَلَهُمْ أَئِمَّةً. We have intended, it is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other verses it's worded that the believers, those who believe, God will give them, allow them to inherit the earth, which means they will be the rulers, they will be on the forefront, they will be the leaders of the world. Who are the leaders of the world right now? Who's leading the world? Is it mu'mineen? Why is that? Why are we behind? Why are we not leading that? Because we're not implementing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Quran, what the Ahlul Bayt have said. We don't carefully understand. What we do understand, we don't implement. We want to try to do all of that, inshallah. We ask Allah to help us. Recite another salawat, please. The chapter I want to refer to, I mentioned the last verses of last night. I want to talk about some of the beginning verses of Surah Al-Fajr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears a few times by a few things. The first is Al-Fajr, daybreak, dawn, from complete darkness. When you see absolutely no light and you think that that is it, there is no light at the end of the tunnel, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises the sun, and there's initially a crack of light. Dawn starts to show. That's Fajr. Okay, that's important. This is metaphoric. This is symbolic. We'll get to it. وَلَيَالٍ عَاشْرٍ, the 10 nights that some have said relates to the nights of Muharram. Some have said that, others have mentioned other dates. وَالشَّفْعِ وَالْوَتْرِ هَلْ فِي ذَلِكَ قَسَمٌ لِذِي حِجْرٍ. Hijr is aql, understanding, wisdom. Anyone who has some level of understanding and wisdom, is there not meaning in these items that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned, for them to be awakened? For what? For the following points. Think about this. In other words, God is preparing your mind with those mentioned, those points that were mentioned. Swearing, He swears by these are important things that you need to remember. Why? أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ إِرَمَ ذَاتِ الْعِمَادِ التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد وفرعون ذي الأوتاد الذين طغوا في البلاد فأكثروا فيها الفساد فصب عليهم ربك سوط عذاب إن ربك لبالمرصاد. This is the complete thought. Look at previous nations. When you're in a particular context, you're in a particular time frame, time doesn't go by that quickly. You don't see the end, the result of actions that sometimes take centuries for them to reveal themselves, for them to show. You don't see that. The effect of certain material effects show over a prolonged period of time. Carbon dating is based on a change that occurs in that particular molecule, right? But that change takes a pretty long time. Okay. We don't actually observe it. We observe a fraction of it. And by comparison, we have noticed that there is such change that occurs over time. If we don't do those experiments, we won't be able to know it. We don't see the results. When we see the results, when you observe the results and you check the causes, you learn something from that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in human actions, in human behavior, does the same thing in the Holy Quran. He talks to us about certain actions, certain behaviors, certain thought processes that people have, and the result of it that you may not observe, but it's happened in the past. And he talks about the causes of them. Look at the previous nation. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ. The civilization of Ad was an amazing civilization. The developments they had, we talk about technological advancements today, which we all see. Just look at the constructions in the world that you see today. The developments on all the different scales. It's an amazing civilization from that perspective, a material civilization, not a divine civilization. The material part of it, we see amazing things. Back in those days, they didn't have the computer technologies. They didn't have the mathematical advancements, at least as far as we know. But we don't know how they were able to build structures that still amaze us. Ad, unfortunately, we haven't seen too many images of. Some of these civilizations you will find remains of in the Middle East, in Syria, in northern Arabia, in Iraq, and in Egypt, which is mentioned here, وَفِرْعَوْنَ ذِي الْأَوْتَادِ, the pyramids. It's astonishing how they were able to develop that. That means there were developments, there were advancements. After that, it went down. People, even today, as we have heard, I haven't investigated this myself, but they say that people have trouble trying to understand how exactly they designed some of these structures. Look at these nations that existed in the past. Look what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did to them. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ. See what your Lord did to the people of Ad. وَثَمُودَ الَّذِينَ جَابُوا الصَّخْرَ الْوَادِ. Thamud, again, their construction, the structures they built, they carved palaces out of rock, huge structures that are amazing. التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد وفرعون ذي الأوتاد الذين طغوا في البلاد. They were طغاة, they rebelled against who? They were rebels against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were the law of the land. Fir'aun said, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. He literally said that. These superpowers consider themselves the law of the land. They are what gives legitimacy to whatever has legitimacy in their mind. And that's what they promote. And because they have all that power, that's what others seem to see. A lot of us make that mistake as well. The Fir'aun of this time, we consider them the boss of the world. They consider themselves the boss. They get to go wherever they wish. And whatever they do is legitimate. And anyone that goes against them is illegitimate. Anyone that goes against them is a taghi, is a rebel. What they do isn't rebellion. That's the way they promote it. The Quran's language, however, is different. الَّذِينَ طَغَوْا فِي الْبِلَادِ. These are rebels. The pharaohs are rebels. These superpowers that go against what God has said, treat people against what God has said, they are rebels. الَّذِينَ طَغَوْا فِي الْبِلَادِ فَأَكْثَرُوا فِيهَا الْفَسَادِ. They caused so much corruption. The Fir'aun, whenever he wished, he ordered Bani Israel, behead the males, kill any male child who was born. After Musa came, again he started it back up again. And that's completely fine. This is how they were. Look at what God did to them. So first see these people of power, and then see what God did to them. One storm, one strike, an entire nation is gone. In the case of the Fir'aun, which is described a little more extensively in the Quran, they walked into that divine trap. They could have just left Musa to themselves. Musa and Bani Israel could have been left. Why didn't he leave them? And he saw Musa that the Fir'aun had already experienced this man. He had experimented on this. There were multiple signs in Egypt that were shown. And then Musa came and sent messengers, Fir'aun sent messengers to Musa, telling him, look, we will believe. Tell your Lord to remove this problem. Diseases, multiple signs were shown. And then when Musa asked Allah, it was removed. Fir'aun, you saw this. Now with your own eyes, you saw he used his cane. He touched that huge body of water and it opened up. You better not walk into that, because the one who opened it will close it. And he doesn't like you. He should have thought of that. But no. Alhamdulillah alladhi ja'ala a'da'ana min al-humaqa is not about us only. It's about all believers. The a'da of the believers and the a'da of Allah, humaqa, stupid. They become stupid right at the wrong time for them. They get really stupid. Should have thought of that, but he walked right into it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala closed that back up. They were gone in a matter of seconds. The problem of Fir'aun didn't start in one day. It's a civilization. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Yusuf. The family of prophets were sent there to correct that, to help that civilization. For a while they were helped. They took that. They were guided. Then they rejected that. And over time this went by. They left Tawheed. They went back to their ways. And they caused more and more corruption. God knows how many centuries went between when they started on the decline by leaving the message of prophethood, and then the time of the Pharaoh, the Fir'aun of Musa, the time of Musa. It appeared over time that they were developing, but they were actually digressing, because it's not about material development. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is real. His design of the universe is real. He says, I have designed it as such. If you move that path, we will remove you and we will wipe you out, and it will be painful. But apparently it seems otherwise. That's why they get arrogant and they keep going. Like, oh, there isn't any God. He's not removing me. Well, yeah, He's not removing me right now. He's giving you time. He's giving you time. Keep going. Keep going. So, the Quranic verses, let's complete this to get to the connection with Imam al-Hussein, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to look at all this. Now, there's a lesson in this for those who are being rebellious, which of course they never listen. All right. The Fir'aun was told, God told Musa, when you go to him, speak to him in a lenient tongue, in lenient words. Okay. Maybe he will accept. Maybe he will accept. No, he rejected in every way possible. And he saw all those signs, rejected. They won't listen. There's a lesson in it for the believers. There's a lesson in it for the believers. See that why, inshallah, we're not of those tughat. We're not trying to be of the tughat. What's the lesson in it for us? وَالْفَاجِرُ وَلَيَالٍ عَاشِرٍ. There is a dawn after darkness. These tughat, if you look at the history of Musa and Fir'aun, Bani Israel were living under very harsh circumstances. Very harsh circumstances. They were trying to keep up their faith. When they were told you can't have any male children because his magicians told him that there will be a child born in this period that will be the one that will destroy you. Some of Bani Israel, it's God's command, have children. They stopped wanting to do that. There were conversations, we have this, it's narrated in our books. That's the harshness, the difficulty. And then you give birth to a child, what happens? They take that child, they behead that child. You try to save the child, you try to hide the child, you try to do all of that. But there were children that were killed. So why do we do that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. But they're going to kill him. We have to do our share, try our best. What's the end of this? Keep going. Is there any end to this? There is a struggle that the believers go through in the context when there are tyrants, tughat, rebels against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Believers have certain responsibilities. When they start complying with those responsibilities, it doesn't initially get easier. It seems like it's complete darkness. There doesn't seem to be an end to this darkness. There doesn't seem to be. We don't see it. It's not in sight. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, there is wait. Be patient. Do what you're supposed to do. And be patient. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do this. You do your share. This is the lesson for us. This is an important lesson. This is a lesson that Imam al-Hussein is showing us. He's reflecting this lesson of the Quran in his movement. He's reflecting. Everything that was said there. أَلَمْ تَرَى كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ. Instead of Aad, these are examples. Instead of Aad, put Yazid, Bani Umayyah. أَلَمْ تَرَى كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِبَنِي أُمَيَّةٍ. Look at what happened. And this is, I hope I'm able to allow us to understand a part of the history of Ashura, a part of the history of Imam al-Hussein that is discussed less than and least from what I can see as compared to all the other aspects of Muharram. That is the effect of the movement of Sayyid al-Shuhada. The effect of it that was desired. The effect of it that Imam al-Hussein wanted to do, and it's said in passing, but I haven't seen it, I didn't hear for many years, personally, listening to all these majalis, different ulama, khutaba, speakers, speaking of Ashura, of Muharram, of Imam al-Hussein, of his movement, of what he did. It's said in passing, but I didn't see anyone, barely anyone, a few here and there, explaining how it is that Imam al-Hussein salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi was actually successful. He won over the other. This requires explanation. Remember